So, I've been playing the second beta of Zenless Zone 0 for 3 days non-stop already. I think I've already seen the general direction that the game leans into. Some of you guys might have some questions related with the game. For example, is there a parry mechanics in this game? Is the game open world? Is the game hard enough, or is it casual or hardcore game? So in here, I will give you my opinion, explain a bit about the game while also answering those questions that you might ask. So let's just jump into it. I will start with the easiest one to explain, the gacha system. Basically, it is just Genshin. Moving on to the story presentation is good. It fits the theme of the game, but in my opinion, the story writing itself is kinda bland, and I'm not really vibing into it. It feels like there is no lore within the story, and it lacks a mystery behind it. I will let this slide, because probably the main selling point in the game is not about the story, which is why you have the most valuable feature ever exists in the game here, which is the skip button. This is probably just my opinion, but I still think that if you are a lore or story geeks, then Star Rail and Genshin is clearly a far better game for this aspect. Another good thing about the story is your MC is actually talk, and what I mean by this is they actively talk, not just 1 or 2 lines like in Genshin. No matter you choose male or female, both will actively talk in the story, so you don't have to worry about not choosing the other one. Is the game open world? The answer is no. It has a small map for you to explore, but this is even smaller than what they had in Honkai Star Rail, so you can imagine the size by yourself. Rather than calling it an open world, it's more like a lobby that you can explore. Similar with Monster Hunter if you ever played the game before. You can get buffs here before jumping into combat, do some mini games, so I think it is a nice touch. I like the aesthetic, and it's better to have it rather than nothing to explore. So what do we do most of the time in the game if the game is not an open world? I mean, there is nothing to explore, right? Well, most of the time is you are going to take some missions from this NPC and then go into the dungeon or hollow deep dive system, this is what it's called in this game, and then finish the missions. By I mean most of the times, it almost like 99% of your time. This is probably just my opinion, but I personally think that it feels like a chores because we are taking missions from a random NPC that we don't care about. And even in the dungeon or deep dive system, you spend most of your time navigating the TV rather than fighting against the enemies itself. The only time you play the roguelike game mode is probably by doing Hollow Zero, which I assume is their endgame content, but for story or side story, you will encounter puzzles most of the time. So it's kinda weird, and it's kinda hinder the main selling point of the game, which is the combat, to be honest. So my suggestion for this is to add the roguelike element into the story as well, rather than just doing puzzles for the whole story mission. Now let's move on to the thing that you actually cares about, which is the combat system. Is it good? Is it fluid enough? I would say it is really good. It is really smooth. It is fast-paced. 10 out of 10, this is probably the best aspect the game could offer. Now, moving on to the parry system. Do we have a parry system? Technically, yes. Why I said it like that? Because not every character can do a parry, and not every attacks can be parried. So basically the same condition as PGR and Wuthering Waves. So what is the difference? The difference is only melee characters can do parry, and you are also limited to a certain numbers of parry. So let's just jump into the tutorials. So to do a parry here, we need to trigger what it's called perfect assist. So how do we trigger perfect assist? Basically just swap in your characters before an attack, and that's it. If you trigger perfect assist with a melee characters, they will parry. If you trigger it with ranged characters, they will dodge the attack instead, and then slow-mo the time. And every time you trigger a perfect assist, you reduce the amount of assist point, which is shown down here. You have a maximum of 3 assist point. And what happens if you try to trigger perfect assist without the assist point? Your character will just trigger a normal dodge instead. So To avoid attack, you can do two things here. 1. Just dodge normally. 2. Swap in your character and trigger perfect assist. Can we regain assist point to do a parry again? Yes, you can, but I think I'm not going to explain the whole combat mechanism here, because it will be just too long for the video. What if the boss attack you multiple times, like for example 3 times in a row? Do we need to swap our characters 3 times too? No, you only need to trigger perfect assist once for the first attack, and it will automatically parry the second and third attack. Again, not every attack can be parried. For example, projectiles and laser beam, you cannot parry that. And if you try to do perfect assist against it, your character will just dodge instead. So as you can see, the parry itself is not really that free to use, but it is applicable for most of the enemies as long as you have assist point. The benefit of this parry system is you don't need to think about your character attack animation, which is easier thing to do rather than getting used to a character you play. What I mean by this is, for example in PGR, doing a perfect parry with Alpha works differently than doing a perfect parry with Baminata, for example, because obviously both have different attack animation that you need to learn to time the attack. This is also the same case with Wuthering Waves. So I don't know, which one do you prefer? So is the game hard? Well, I will be honest with you, I've been playing for like 18 to 20 hours already and still haven't died even once. And looking at the other beta testers or any other content creators, I haven't seen they die yet, or at least struggle in the game. But of course, it's not fair for me to say this without trying their endgame content. But I just want to let you know that it is almost impossible for you to die in the early game unless you go AFK, right? Or maybe playing with a character that has 10 level below recommendation in Hollow Zero. But I assume this won't be a problem as well if you have a character at the right level, because so far I cleared the Hollow Zero normally, so yeah, I won't give any comment about this till I reach the endgame content by myself. But to be honest with you, in my opinion, they need to design the combat in a certain difficulty that encourage people to actually dodge or parry, because at this point, it doesn't matter if you do a perfect dodge or parry anymore, because you just mash your button and wins the game anyway. The other thing that I think they severely lacks of is a boss battle. You probably seen I barely upload any boss fight because there is no boss fight. Or to put it simply, their boss fight is not that memorable. I've been playing for hours and most of the time I'm just killing a bunch of smaller enemies. I don't even realize that Dullahan is one of a boss fight. I thought it was an elite enemies, to be honest, till they asked me in one of their survey, which is asking about my opinion about the boss. But to be fair with the game, this is still the early chapter of the game. PGR also had the same issue during their early chapter, so I try to be positive and I hope they improve the boss fight in the future. That's all about the video. Honestly, there are still a bunch of other things that I want to talk about, but I think I will just put it into the feedback survey later. Overall, it is a very fun game, but it gets boring really fast after your first 24 hours of gameplay without endgame content or a real boss fight. So yeah, I hope they could improve this upon release, and that's all I want to say. See you in the next video. To end this, here is a Dullahan boss fight with story characters. Enjoy it.
You just won't leave us alone. Say goodbye to nice Nicole.
Those are some frenzied Imperials. Watch out!
Who cares? Just hand over my stuff.
Nice! Sounds like Nicole's frenzied too!
Be gone.
Let's clear them out!
No more. Go power. Yes. Yes. a little treat! Like this!
They're close.
Almost.
Feel the ultimate starlight!
This won't hurt. Full power.